When you do a 365 and when you shoot every day, there is no way that you're not going to progress. You are going to get better every day. You're picking up, you're experimenting, you're shooting every day, you're looking through that viewfinder, you're working on your composition. You're going to get better.
Hey, welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. I'm your host, Raymond Hatfield. And each week I interview one of the world's most interesting photographers to learn what it really takes to capture beautiful images so that you can start to do the same. In today's Rewind episode, we are chatting with family photographer Ashley Marston about capturing the magic of everyday life. But first, the Beginner Photography Podcast is brought to you by CloudSpot. With CloudSpot, you can sell your photos through prints, products, and of course, digitals. You can set up a storefront in minutes and start earning more with every gallery you send. So grab your free Forever account over at deliverphotos.com and only upgrade when you are ready. I found today's guest, Ashley Marston, when I saw that 2 of her photos were chosen by Nat Geo as photos of the year. As I dove more into Ashley's Instagram, I actually saw that she was doing a 365 photo project, which, maybe many of you are as well. So today we talk about creating a daily creative practice for yourself so that your skills can continue to build. We talk about how to capture more authentic moments and why capturing real-life experiences will always be better than staged poses. And we also talk about her work capturing families in birth photography and handling the unpredictable nature that is, nature's process. I highly encourage you to check out her work on Instagram, which you can find by clicking the link in the show notes of this episode, because I know that you're going to love this one. So with that, let's go ahead and get on into today's Rewind interview with Ashley Marston. Today's guest is Ashley Marston, a birth and family photographer from our neighbor to the north, British Columbia, Canada. Professionally, her work has received notable awards from the International Association of Professional Birth Photographers, and personally, her work has been recognized most recently by National Geographic. And today, I can't wait to get into talking about shooting professionally and personally. So Ashley, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. This is like a series of interviews that I've been doing where I've been reaching out to the listeners of the Beginner Photography Podcast and asking if you could have anybody on the podcast, who would it be? And your name came up. So I am so excited to have you on.
Awesome.
And I know that it's just going to, as a wedding photographer, I don't shoot children. I don't shoot really anything else.
Yeah.
So being able to talk to other photographers and hearing their stories is not only helpful to me, but I know that it's going to expand the horizons of our listeners. So again, thank you so much for coming on. Like I mentioned in your intro, you've received awards for your work, but I'm sure that, you didn't just wake up yesterday and thought, I'm going to get into photography and start winning some awards. So can you share what drew you into photography in the beginning?
Well, I think I started like a lot of mom photographers in the past 5 years. My son Noah was born 13 years ago. He's 13, my oldest. And my husband had an old film camera in the closet. And so I dusted it off, and that's kind of where it began. But I would just kind of experiment with that for about 5 years before I finally kind of went digital. And that's where it took off for me.
Why is that? Why did it take off for you once you started shooting digital?
I think that it's just a lot easier to experiment when you're shooting digital because you can see it instantly. Whereas with film, it would definitely the progress was a little bit slower for me, but it just got me used to composition and documenting our life and documenting being a mom and my son. And so we have albums and albums of of photos of Noah, just because I just went through so many rolls of film. So,
So in the beginning, when you had that film camera and you picked it up for the first time, Do you remember what shot was it that you took where you thought, you know what, I'm really enjoying this and I think that I can take it somewhere?
There was a shot. My husband is First Nations and he's an artist. He's a carver. And so we have various sort of artifacts around the house. And we had a woven cedar hat. And Noah was outside on the sun deck and he was wearing this cedar hat and he was just this sitting up, like he was maybe 8 or 9 months old, and the shadows coming through the hat and on his face. And that's one of my favorite pictures. And that was the time where it was kind of clicked for me. And it was like, okay, this is how I'm seeing this moment. And then to get the film back and see that it actually had translated from my mind to the image felt like I was doing something important. It felt like for our family and for myself. Felt good.
How long do you think it was from the time that you first picked up that camera till the time that you got that shot and realized that the creative gap that you had in your head to the photo that you got in your hand was very similar? Was that like a years long progression, or was it pretty
Um,
quick?
It was pretty quick. It was pretty quick. But like I had been artistically inclined throughout high school. I actually took photography in high school. So I think that made the gap a little bit closer for me, that I'd kind of had already a bit of a jump start on it.
Mhm.
But like photographing children and things like, I mean, very different, obviously. But he wasn't moving too much at that point.
That sure does make it a whole lot easier
It
when the
makes
kids
it
aren't
easier,
moving.
yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell me again how long you were shooting film before you switched to digital?
Oh, I guess 4 years.
Okay,
I
so
think
in that 4 years, shooting film, shooting your family, these things that you loved, what would you say was the hardest part about the technical side of photography for you to learn?
I don't know what the composition came okay to me. And I think just learning light was what I worked on the most for those years. And of course, it came a lot quicker and easier once there was a digital camera in my hand and I could really kind of see what I was looking at.
Can you expand a little bit more on learning to shoot with light?
Well, I knew in my, like, I could see in my mind, like I was noticing it all the time.
Hmm.
And this was kind of before things were on the internet, and it would just catch my eye a certain way. And so the kids, and I would just move, I'd start moving the kids into the light and just exposing for the shadows and things like that, where I felt that that's where I was kind of really honing in on what I wanted to do and see. In the beginning, everything was overexposed. And I said, well, that's not right. That's not how I want to see it. That's not how I see it in my mind. So that was kind of how I moved in that progression, slowly at first. And then it kind of just came. And then I just
Yeah.
it clicks, right? It clicks all of a
Yeah.
sudden. And then you're like, right, okay.
Yeah. There's always that aha moment when it comes to photography of,
Yeah.
you feel like you're struggling so hard in the beginning.
Yeah.
Even like every little thing that you learn feels like you just crossed over this mountain. Like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this is totally making sense. And as time goes
Yeah.
on, the
Like,
mountains
why didn't
get
I see
smaller and
that the whole
smaller.
time?
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. But at some point, there's one mountain that is just so tall that when you get up to the top of it, you say, oh my gosh, why didn't I see this the whole time?
Yeah.
Everything makes sense now.
Yeah.
And I love to hear that because usually it is a technical aspect, either
Yeah.
like, oh, the relationship between ISO and shutter speed. But hearing you say, no, it was the light, it was paying attention to the
Paying
light,
attention.
finally being
Yeah.
able to see it. I think that's a great new take. And I appreciate hearing a new perspective for sure. So this past year, like I mentioned earlier, National Geographic chose 2 of your photos to be in the top 36 photos in a year-long international competition, which is just insane. It's insane.
I
So
know, right?
congratulations there.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
With over 19,000 entries, is that right?
I
2
think
of
so,
yours
yeah.
was, that's incredible. That
Yeah,
must
it's
have felt amazing,
crazy.
right?
Yeah, well, yeah. It was a bit mind blowing. I saw the first one, and then I always, of course, I look through everybody's to see what's included and the collection in itself. And then another one popped up, and did I see that? I kind of went back and forth a couple times. Like, no, that's not. Like it took a little bit for it to compute, and then it definitely just kind of blew my mind for a second. So,
That's incredible.
still is blowing my mind, really. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, it should be. And congratulations again
thank
for
you.
that. And those 2 photos, they were personal works of yours, correct?
One was personal, and one was a birth photography photo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how did it come about to find yourself in being in this position to be chosen, 2 of your photos to be chosen out of more than 19,000?
The beginning of 2018, I set goals for myself, and nothing that I write down and whatever. It's just at the beginning of the year. I don't believe in resolutions, but I do believe in just goals. National Geographic was on my list. I had belonged to the Your Shot community, which I think has like 1 million photographers in it worldwide, for a couple of years, and had been submitting here and there. Not anything that I had really focused on. And last year I decided to focus on that. And so I had been submitting to them over the course of the year, and had 7 photos chosen throughout the year to be part of the Daily Dozen. So they pick 12 photos every day to feature. So those were huge moments for me. And then they kind of pop up these assignments that you can submit to, or these competitions that you can submit to. And so those were what I thought 2 of my best photos of the year. And so those were two that I had submitted, and they were chosen.
And they thought so too. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's awesome. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about personal work here
Sure.
because it's something that I know personally I don't do enough of. I thought that it would be one of the driving factors. It was one of the driving factors to get into photography. But then over time, it's become more and more professional. And now really, I just kind of stick with just my iPhone for personal photography and stuff.
Yeah,
It's easier to share photos.
totally.
Last year, I chatted with Jenny Stein on the podcast, who she talks a lot about doing a 365, a project
Yeah.
365. So after that interview, some members in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group started inquiring about a 365 and even started doing one this year. So in the group, Carrie, who is just going hard right now on her project 365, every day she uploads a new photo, and it's great to see her work progress. But when I asked her what she would want to hear from you, what questions she would ask you, she wanted to know, as an established photographer, what are your goals doing a personal 365, and how do you make time for it? I know that was a lot to unpack, so I'll give you a second.
My goals for the 365 have changed every year. I'm actually in my 5th year of doing a 365. So
Incredible.
at this point in time, it would feel weird for me to not do it because it has just become part of our life and part of my workflow. And so what I've done every year is I have focused on one thing to work on. And in the first year, it was light because that's where I was at. And in the second year, I worked on composition. And in the third year, I worked on putting myself in the frame more because that was what I had noticed looking back on the project, was that I was vacant, right?
Yeah. It's very common for photographers.
Very common for photographers, very common for mothers, especially
Yeah.
with 2 young kids. I mean, we have 3 children now. Our 2 youngest are only 11 months apart. So we were really in the thick of things, and body wise, and I don't want to put myself in front of a camera, but you have to, because otherwise how are they going to see you, right? So I think the next year, movement, things like that, every year I kind of honed in on something different every year and focused on that. Now in my 5th year, my goal is I don't shoot as much anymore. I feel like in the past years, I've been really I gotta get this. And I've relaxed. And so I'm just going to relax. My kids are 6 and 7 and 13. So they're all in school, and I don't feel as much pressure anymore. I'm just going to document us as I see us, and celebrate us. So that's kind of was my goal this year, was to just chill out. I didn't know even if I was going to do another 365. I feel like at the end of December every year, I'm I'm not going to do it. I'm going to take a year off. And then I kind of just, I feel like I would be lost without it. So I just keep going.
Hilarious.
I just keep going. So
yeah. You said that obviously the kids are in school now
Yeah.
during the day, and then you don't shoot as much. Can you tell me what that means? You don't shoot as much? Because obviously you're still shooting every day.
Yeah, I'm still shooting every day. I'm very conscious now about getting my shot and then putting the camera down.
Mm-hmm.
Especially too, because now that they are older, I mean, I've been really lucky that my kids are welcoming of it. I've heard of photographers starting them and their kids just hate the camera. They're get that away from me every time they pull it out. My kids are not like that at all. But I'm conscious of getting what I need and then just putting it away. Okay, now I'm just going to carry on throughout my day. And then if I see something later on, then sure, maybe I'll take another shot. But I feel like in the past years, it was out all the time, and I was constantly striving to get something. Maybe I didn't like that shot. Maybe I wanted to get another one. But I feel like my confidence has grown. What I want to capture and what I want to preserve for them, I see it, I take it, and then I leave it. So
how long
I think
did that
that's
take
changed.
to hone that discipline?
It's only really been in the past couple of years. I feel like maybe year 3 it started, where I was okay, yeah. So it's only every so often I'll come up to my computer at night when everybody goes to bed and I'll upload, and it doesn't happen very often where I'm oh no, I don't like that at all. I feel like I've got it. But that really has only just been recent. But it's been a good progression. I constantly felt like I was getting better. So it's not as if there was this void where like I wasn't getting better. When you do a 365 and when you shoot every day, there is no way that you're not going to progress. You are going to get better every day. I mean, that's just the fact of it. You're picking up, you're experimenting, you're shooting every day, you're looking through that viewfinder, you're working on your composition, you're going to get better. So that's what I love about it.
I think, and I could be totally wrong, so this could be a terrible question, but we're going to try it out anyway.
Sure.
I think that when you have the constraints of a 365, like your goal is to get one good photo every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you put a lot of weight on that. So you're like, that one photo has to be a great photo. And every day you go out and try to get something. But do you guys get much snow up there in it's the western half of Canada, right?
Yeah, we're on the very, very west coast.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here in the Midwest, it's very snowy and cold, and you really don't leave your house like unless you have to.
Yeah.
And in times like this, if we're stuck at home, what do we shoot? What should we be focusing on? What should we look for?
Well, I'll tell you that like not every day is going to be a great photo. Not every day is going to be an award winning photo. And I think that a lot of people struggle with that. I have chosen, me and my husband have chosen to share my project on social media. So I'm literally posting my photo every single day and have for 5 years. And not everyone is amazing, but it's amazing to my kids,
Mm-hmm.
right? Essentially, this project is for them. So while it's not going to get me 300 likes, it's going to have a connection and have a purpose for my kids in later years. So that's what I always have to think back on. And so that's where social media gets a bit tricky, where there's this like constant need to produce this mind-blowing work. And sometimes you do. Sometimes you post something and you're like, wow, like that is my best work. And then sometimes it's like, meh, but that's one that ends up being one of the photos that my kids will see and they'll be like, oh, I remember that day. And I remember. And so you got to kind of bring it. I always in my mind, I was like, you got to bring it back home because that's what this is for. This project is for them. And so for me, that's what it is for me. I mean, people can have their project for different purposes, but for most photographers, that's generally, it's a keepsake, right? It's a story of your days. And so in regards to having crappy weather and having to stay inside, we get a lot of rain. And so I find that that's when my creativity comes through, when I can't rely on the beautiful backlight or the stunning ocean views because it's pouring down rain. That's where I'm like, okay, what can I do inside? What can I capture? How can I see this differently? And after 5 years, like, you know, I've been photographing the same children in the same house for 5 years. So it's like, how can I reignite this space? How can I see the same kind of subject and thing, but differently? And so I use things like prisms and double exposures. I've been working really hard on this year, free lensing. And I bring it back to the details because we live on Vancouver Island, which I don't know if you've looked it up, but it is gorgeous. I always do these big, expansive, beautiful shots of my kids in this wonderful place, but I often forget to photograph just the tiny details. And so in those dark, gloomy days, I'll photograph the wisps of hair on my daughter's neck or my 13-year-old son's hands, or because those are things that are important as well. Mm-hmm. So that's always, you know, I just kind of bring it back to the details.
Wow. That was an incredibly personal answer. And I think that it's going to be one that the listeners are really going to appreciate because it is, I know from experience that just shooting inside, it can become a chore. And hearing mm-hmm. your take on it, thinking about the future rather than how many likes you're going to get today on social media is really something that we got to learn how to control, you know, ourselves. And I got a lot out of that statement. And again, I really appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. So next question. On your website, it says that you are a birth, documentary, and lifestyle photographer. So real quick, for those who are unaware, can you clarify the difference between documentary and lifestyle photography?
That's a bit of a tricky one. And a lot of people want to sort of put themselves in a box. They're either documentary or they're either lifestyle. I choose to put both on my website because I am a little bit of both. And so documentary essentially is like not changing, not directing, not changing the scene, not turning off any lights, not decluttering, that sort of stuff. Whereas lifestyle has a minimal amount of direction with your families. And so I shoot day in the life sessions, which are like strictly documentary. I'm just an observer. I'm just documenting what I see. And then all of my other family work, maternity, newborn families, is all lifestyle. So there's really minimal direction. I focus on the connection and the love in families. And I've just chosen, and the birth work is documentary, obviously, as well.
Of course, yeah.
And so it kind of just all mixes really well together. And I've just tried to not put myself in a box and just allowed myself to capture love essentially in all of its forms. So
Gotcha.
That's what I've built my business around.
So you said that for your day in the life sessions, they are primarily documentary type work.
Yeah.
So when would it be appropriate to do more of a lifestyle type shoot? How do you decide between the two? If you were to show up to a house today, family, I saw very recently you posted, I believe it was a child's like first birthday, like their day in the life session with So if you were to show up in that situation, do you make a conscious decision on whether or not you're going to just let the day unravel in front of you, or if you are going to make some small adjustments to the scene in front of you? Or is there a hard line in when you do which?
It's their choice. So when they're booking the session, they're either booking a day in the life or they're booking a lifestyle family session. And I can do, we have the choice to do lifestyle family out in the wild, or we can do it in their home. So that's just a bit more of like, hey, we're going to go in the bedroom now. We're going to come and sit on the couch, come and tickle on the couch. Whereas like documentary, I'm literally just like, I'm just sneaking in and they're going about their day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's decided at booking. And so that's how I that's how I map out my session.
Wonderful. I love it. Okay. So then what drew you into birth photography?
I've been a birth photographer for 6.5 years. I started my business. Sophie, our youngest, our third, was only just a few months old when I had discovered birth photography. I came across an article online in the New York Times while I was nursing her on Lindsay Stone, who was the first birth photographer. And it was kind of just it was my aha moment, because I had been shooting families for probably about 3 years, kind of on and off as I was having babies. And I was kind of stuck. I was stuck doing what I thought I should be doing. I was stuck doing what everybody else was doing. And I thought, well, this is the way that my photography is supposed to be. I guess this is what everybody else is doing.
What do you mean by that? You mean like style of work?
Just,
or
yeah, like it was mostly just posed family photography. You'd go out to a park and everybody would sit down on a blanket and they'd turn and smile at you. And that was it.
Yeah.
And so I would still be shooting the in-between moments, and then I would deliver them to the clients with their turning and smiling photos. And I was finding that those were the moments that I was more drawn to. And it seemed to be the moments that they were more drawn to. And so it was kind of a slow progression into a change in my business where I felt that I didn't have to stick with what was kind of expected.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd had my babies. And I actually pondered becoming a labor and delivery nurse because I felt so at home in that environment, but I knew I needed a creative outlet.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came across the article on birth photography, it was like a light had just gone off in my world. And so I had called my husband and said, I think I know what I want to do when I grow up. He was like, okay.
Yeah.
And then I said, I'm going to need your support. Like, you got to be 100% on board, because there's an on-call component, right? Where like I'm on call, and that affects our life greatly. And also that means I'm building a business from the ground up and educating the public on what birth photography is. So it was a hustle for sure. And I knew that if I didn't start it then, that I would kind of miss the boat on it. And it was a tricky time. Like I said, my two youngest are only 11 months apart. My youngest was only 3. Like, I was raising these 2 tiny babies and starting a business, and up in the middle of the night shooting births, and just trying to get the work out there to show people what it was. Because at that point in time, there was only a handful of us that were shooting birth, and it was unknown really. Now, of course, it's more mainstream. So that was my start into birth photography. And that's where my business just went, like, it skyrocketed. It took off from there.
That's awesome. You talked earlier about shooting day in the life sessions, which I think is so cool. That's got to be something that I've always had this dream of, like when I was in high school, to be able to just like follow a band around, right? For like 6 months, or
Yeah.
like have some sort of like long-term project to where you don't know what's going to happen by the end of your journey, but you want to
Yeah.
be able to capture it all so that you can go back and tell that story. And when it comes to like day in the life family sessions, that's kind of how I see that as well, right? You show up in the morning, you don't really know what's going to happen. And then by the end of it, you're hoping to have a nice little portfolio of images to deliver. So can you kind of walk me through stuff like time requirements for something like that? And then also, what is your goal for those day in the life sessions?
Well, my day in the life sessions are booked in 4, 8, or 12-hour sessions. So the family gets to choose how long they want me there for. And then they also get to choose what they want me to capture. So questions that I ask them are like, what's important to you in your day? What are some things that you want to capture? Do you want to go somewhere? Do you want to just stay at home? So these are all conversations that I have with my clients beforehand. And I find that a lot of people, it's the morning. The mornings are very sacred to families, and they're sacred to us too. Like our Saturday or Sunday mornings they're wonderful, right? I mean, I'm sure I would love to actually capture the hustle and the craziness of a school morning, but Saturday mornings are slow and they're easy. And so when I say to them, like, we can go to the park, we can go to the beach, we can go to the grandparents' house, I follow. Wherever you go, I follow. We can go to the grocery store. And so they decide kind of how the day is going to be mapped out. And I just document all the little moments in between. I kind of started doing these because I knew that it was something that I would want for my family. So when I'm capturing these families, I kind of put myself in that position where I'm like, what kind of keepsake would I want to end up with? And so it's kind of a mixture between the conversations I have with them, with what they want to capture, and then what I think as an end product. When they're looking at this, when their kids are graduating or when they're having grandchildren, what is the memory that you want to preserve for them from this one day? And not every client chooses to have film, but I do these little short family films for them. And so in the end product, I want them to be able to feel the feelings they felt that day. I want it to trigger memories, smells, tastes, like, the creak of the floorboards in the house, or just things like that. So I want to make sure that I'm capturing those things, because you never know for people what part of an image is going to trigger that memory for them, what sound is going to bring them right back to that moment. So that's kind of my goal, is to provide something timeless for them to watch 20 years from now.
And to just be able to immerse themselves back in that moment, just
Totally back
through
in that
looking at your
morning,
work.
back in that day. Yeah. Yeah.
So if you've never been to like a client's house, this is something that I've kind of become very interested in just recently. And it's kind of like this creative brain. I really want to know more about how the creative brain works. And there's more than just one way for that creatives work. So do you think that creativity for you involves just putting your heart and soul into your work, just planning out every little detail, becoming a perfectionist? Or is it letting your mind just flow freely to witness whatever happens?
That's a good question. I feel like it's a little bit of both. Am I
Oh
allowed to
no,
say?
there's
Am I
a
allowed
third
to say
option.
that? There's a third option. I pick C. I am very controlled. I have that like sort of A-type personality, but as a documentarian, I have taught myself to step back and observe and document. And so part of me is trying to be creative, but also be true to what's happening. So it's a bit of a balance, especially with those kinds of sessions. And it's sort of true for my 365 project too. I'm trying to document what's happening, but also in a creative way. So I don't know if that helps your answer or not.
No, it does help. For a little bit more clarification, can you give me an example of maybe a personal shot that you've taken where maybe you wanted more strict, following of the rules for a photo, or the complete opposite, where maybe everything was going too, down the line and you wanted it to be more whimsical? Or if you don't, like if you can't think of one off the top of your head, what would you do in that situation?
In the situation where I was documenting something but wanted to put a different spin on it, is that?
Yeah, I suppose like you were having trouble putting your own spin on it.
Well, I think it kind of takes me back to like the indoor raininess of the west coast of Canada.
Yeah.
And where, I remember this one time it rained for like a week. It just rained and rained and rained and rained. And we were going squirrely. Like we we were going squirrely inside the house. And I wanted to document that, but I didn't want it to be, it's like, well, I guess I could bring the kids out in their umbrellas and, whatever. And then that's where I'm like, well, I could somehow do a double exposure with this, right? I could create sort of the somber look of what we're going through inside, but then bring the rain in. And so I took a portrait of my son, a black and white portrait of my oldest son inside. And then I photographed the rain. And then I did an in-camera double exposure, and I photographed the rain on our windows and then put them together. And that was a few years ago. Like they were kind of, double exposures were kind of just coming out at that point in time. And I had to Google how to do it.
I'm sure people still today Google how to do it.
We're still Googling how to do it. It's very tricky. So that was when I was kind of trying to capture, but then wanting to kind of break the rules and mix it up a little bit. So.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Is there something that you do to put yourself in a creative mindset?
There's not something that I specifically do. No, I think that I don't leave that space very often. Mm-hmm. Well, because especially with capturing your family every day, like, the camera is out and I'm constantly looking and I'm constantly aware. And as a house of creatives, I mean, like I said, my husband is an artist and the kids are like playing music and drawing. I mean, this is just a creative environment. So we're always kind of in that creative cloud happening.
Do you ever feel like you show up to a day in the life session or a birth and think to yourself, just feel like you're not feeling it that day? Like, I got to go to work, and if so, I'll be honest, I feel that way sometimes showing up to weddings, and it's not, it's still a good day, but you do it for several years and you're bound and determined to have at least one of those days. Is there something that you do in those moments to kind of put yourself back in line?
I think for birth, that's true for birth, especially because often, you've been on call for months at a time. Often you're called out in the middle of the night. You don't want to get out of bed. Yeah. Maybe it's been a rough day at home and now you got to go to work and you got to be on. Like you can't do this halfway, right? Yeah. And so there's been times where I've definitely sort of slugged my way along. But once you're there and you're in it, it just turns on, mm-hmm. right? It just kind of turns on. And that's kind of what I rely on, where I'm like, I know that once I get there and I get going, it's not going to be an issue.
Right.
And so day in the life, there was just actually the little boy who turned 1 while I was there that weekend, I shot his birth. And I had actually had a birth on the Friday. So I was scheduled to see them on the Saturday and I had a birth happen on the Friday. And so I just emailed them and was like, if we could change it to Sunday, like you're going to get the best version of Ashley Marston that you possibly can. Because if I come Saturday morning, like it's
going to be rough.
I'm just going to be honest, and they're like, oh yeah, no big deal. It was not an issue at all. And that's the conversation even that I have with my clients, because I mean, there's always a chance that I'm going to get called out to a birth. And so if you're going to book a session like that, and there's always a slight possibility that we might have to change things up. So everybody's pretty on board. And I think it's just being, knowing yourself and being like, okay, if there's room to change this, then let's just make some adjustments. And then I showed up Sunday morning and was 100
was your best self.
100% my best self.
Yeah, I looked through the whole blog and it was just great, incredible photos. And I know that I would be thrilled to have photos like that of our family, especially the photo with everybody in their robes, with mom and dad drinking coffee with the little boy. That was such a great photo. That
wasn't like totally, they synchronized, like was not even remotely, I didn't even tell them to do anything.
They just all sat down on the floor.
After I took the photo, I laughed and I said to them, like, you guys completely like synchronized coffee drinking. And then he looked right at me and I was like, that is the perfect shot. That sums up parenthood with a 1-year-old all in one frame.
I love those happy accidents for sure.
I know, me too.
Well, Ashley, I have taken far too much of your time. You've been so gracious with me and answering every question that I have thrown at you. I got one last question, and that is, I want to know what advice you would give to somebody just breaking into photography. It doesn't necessarily have to be birth, but just somebody who's smart and they're driven and they want to make a go at this, whether through a business or just through personal. What advice would you give them?
I would tell them to shoot what they love find what they love to shoot and go for it. Because if you're trying to be somebody else, if you're trying to go with the masses and shoot what you think you should be shooting, then your success will not come as quickly. I think that it really shows in your work when you are shooting things that you are really passionate about, and people see that right away and they're drawn to it. Be yourself and shoot what you love.
Beautiful.
So.
Beautiful. Ashley, can you let the listeners know where they can find you online to follow along and check out your work?
Well, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and I post every single day. So you can definitely follow along with what we're doing daily. So
perfect. Ashley, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I truly appreciate you, and I can't wait to follow along more in depth into your own 365. I was going to say 365, and then I decided halfway through your own project, and hopefully start doing something like that for myself. So again, Ashley, thank you for coming on the podcast.
It's never too late. Thank you so much.
Why don't you come join me and more than 6,000 fellow listeners of the podcast over in the free and amazing Beginner Photography Podcast community so that you can learn and grow your skills. So just, if you want to join, head over to beginnerphotopod.com/group now. Thanks again for tuning into today's episode. And until next week, remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. Start a conversation. Grow together. That is it for this week. Remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.